Welcome to the Gen Z Marketer Podcast, the show for the upcoming generation of marketers. Here we talk about marketing, branding, e commerce, and the power of integrated marketing communication. I'm your host, Jimmy O'Malley, a strategist passionate and specializing in branding and marketing for e commerce. Netflix's The Social Dilemma is one of my favorite investigative documentaries as a marketer. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you go to Netflix and check it out after this episode, as it looks into how social networks have impacted consumer behavior. In this episode, let's talk about exactly how social networks, specifically Facebook, changed our consumer behavior. So, how has it impacted us as users? As marketers, is it causing us more harm than good? So before we get to it, don't forget to support the show by following the podcast to get notified on the latest uploads. Facebook has been around for at least a decade, and the platform has significantly grown and innovated since. I remember creating my own Facebook account around 2009, and during that time, social media networks weren't new, as Friendster and MySpace, both of which aren't around anymore, were the dominant platforms at the time. I also actually created my Twitter account around the same time I started Facebook, and this was during high school. So during the time, along with my circle of family and friends, created Facebook to socialize, primarily, of course, but it was also known to be more than a social media platform. It was known for games you can play with friends. During that time, most of the people I know were playing games such as Farmville and Pet Society. And if you're listening and if you've been around during that time, I'm pretty sure you remember that too. So, connecting and collaborating with your network was made easier with Facebook. So I actually primarily use Facebook to communicate with classmates, like with its origins as a platform to connect university students. So Facebook made it easier to create a group for classes, share information, files, and more. So the platform's humble beginnings for socialization has changed with new features through the years, such as an emphasis for video games, live streaming, and even businesses. Our use and behavior has evolved beyond socializing. So not only do users go to the platform to communicate and be entertained, but they now use it to also stay informed and to be expressive of themselves. So the platform at this point has been integral to our daily lives and has consistently influenced our behavior. Imagine for some people, maybe the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is to check your Facebook. Or when you're commuting, you check your Facebook or social media. Huge. If you want to find out what's going on, maybe for some people, they go to Facebook first to see if there's anything new going on. So, without knowing it really, it has pretty much overtaken or has changed the way we do things. Facebook's algorithm and pixels are, similar to cookies, of course. And because of these features, the platform is able to make recommendations on content users that are most likely to engage with. So whatever you see on your feed is based on the algorithm, right? And usually what you see is things that you really want to see or most likely you'd want to see. And because of that, users are encouraged to stay longer on the platform and to interact with content. And that's what the platform wants. It's almost like you're falling down a rabbit hole as you see more and more content that will not make you leave the platform. So, in the social dilemma, we see how the algorithm works in a way that can heavily influence perceptions and opinion. We see how those who are impressionable are more likely to get recommendations that would most likely change their way of their thinking, while those who aren't get recommendations related to their views. So what do I mean by this? For example, if you're impressionable, or meaning you're easier to persuade, or you're easier to influence or change the behavior, your behavior or opinion, they will show you content that is most likely to change the way you think. And for those who are pretty, let's say, less impressionable, meaning their opinions, their values are more defined, so they're not easy to persuade or change, then they won't get content that would persuade them. Rather, they would get content that supports their way of thinking. So that's something that I think users are also not aware of. For marketers, we are aware of that because of how the algorithm works, because we're supposed to be familiar, but users are not. And without knowing it, their behavior, their way of thinking is being influenced. We also mentioned pixels that are useful for marketers and advertisers. We use this for more effective campaign targeting and insights. However, the interest in data privacy in the past few years has now caused a shift in the information accessible to marketers. Consumers are also concerned on giving their information and how it will be used by businesses. So, at least in the context of the Philippines, I don't think Filipinos are that aware of how the algorithm works or how their information is being used by online platforms. Unlike in, let's say, the US or other Western markets that are more aware of these issues, are investigating and making legislations to address these issues. So here in the Philippines, I think it's a quite different story. That we just notice how, Facebook would say have updates or changes in their policy, but I don't think there's that awareness that this is what's happening in the platform, right? So we also saw, like, as we're going through deeper in this discussion in the social dilemma, we also know that with the good of social media, or of Facebook in particular, it's good that we're getting connected to one another. It's good that we're able to collaborate or communicate easily. It's good that we stay connected somewhat, and we see what matters to us. For some, there's some good in social media, but there are also bad that comes along with it, such as how it has affected mental health, how it has affected relationships, how it is now the root of disinformation, and more. So, a platform that supposedly connects people has also caused division. Users also have shorter attention spans, are more conscious on how their data is used, and can easily see through ads. So, there's that continuous shift in consumer behavior as these platforms continuously update or innovate themselves. So, as the features evolve, so does the consumption and attitude of users. So, marketers need to constantly stay on top of these changes in order to effectively connect with their audience. But also, marketers need to ensure the protection of consumers' data as well as use it ethically. With the emerging and evolving trends in innovation and behavior, brands should practice integrity in marketing. By being in tune with consumer behavior and values, brands can have more meaningful relationships with audience. So let's not abuse or take advantage of the technology, as marketers. I think we should start recognizing or practicing restraint, being more ethical, and the integrity of, using the information or tracking information and targeting our audiences. So on a personal note, because of course I talked about, like, the insights I shared earlier are mostly more neutral or more, third person or practical. But now I want to share my personal note about the social dilemma. It really reminds us on how social media has changed our lives. As we said, like as we talked about earlier, how Facebook has affected us. But the social dilemma further, it's not just Facebook. Can also be platforms like Google and all other platforms, social networking platforms. Some of us may not even be aware of how it is a double-edged sword that is causing connections and divides. at the same time. The algorithm is beneficial in showing us what we're most likely to engage with. For some personally, you of course you'd like to see things that you're interested in. You don't want to see things that you don't, care about, or things that you're not interested in. But at the same time, it borders the line between influence and manipulation. Because I think there's a fine line between, influencing opinion, or and being manipulated in changing the way you think. And users are most likely to be not even aware of how information they provide is being used against them. For some users, maybe, especially for us, for those outside of marketing, some of you may not even be aware that whatever it is you post on Facebook, whatever it is the information you give Facebook, most of them are most likely not aware of how those information is being used to get to know you, who you are, and basically giving you the content that would influence you or manipulate you, as I said. So what is the line, or how much do we give these platforms, right? Or better yet, how do these platforms protect us? How when it's really a very delicate, timely issue on morality, I guess. And you know it really tells us that this social dilemma will continuously affect us in the future. It is affecting us now, and it will continue to affect us in the future. So if you haven't seen it yet, as I said, I do suggest that you watch it. For brands, it is a reminder on how we should ethically use social media. And for users, it can give you an idea on the dark side of social networks. So I really do recommend that you check it out. And my question to you is, how do we move forward with this social dilemma? Like, what are your thoughts if you've seen the show? What are your thoughts on it? Or, based on what we discussed, what are your insights that you'd also like to add? I want to hear from you, and you can find me at the Gen Z Marketer Podcast on Facebook, at Gen Z MKT on Instagram, and at www.genzmkt.com.